The Council killed a human envoy. Earth strikes back with full fury part. 4. The news spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Within 36 hours of the Battle of Calax Prime, every major civilization knew what had happened. The human fleet had appeared without warning, destroyed the Calaxian home fleet, crippled their shipbuilding capacity, and captured Councillor Vreth. The species that had been dismissed as primitive newcomers had just humiliated one of the Galactic Council's established horrors. The emergency session of the Council was chaotic. Delegates shouted over each other in dozens of languages. Some demanded immediate military action against Earth. Others called for restraint and investigation. A few quietly calculated how this new reality might benefit their own positions. Chairman Quelix struggled to maintain order, his multiple arms waving frantically as he called for silence. The Vrelian ambassador was one of the loudest voices for war. His species had been allied with the Calaxians for centuries. He stood before the assembly, his crystalline body pulsing with angry colors, and declared that humanity's actions were an act of war against the entire council. The humans had violated sovereign territory, destroyed military assets, and kidnapped a sitting councillor. Such aggression could not stand unpunished. If the council did not respond with overwhelming force, it would show weakness that other species might exploit. But not everyone agreed. The Eldari representative, an ancient being whose species valued wisdom above all else, rose to speak in a voice like wind through trees. She reminded the council that Vreth had committed murder in the council chamber itself. The humans had demanded justice. The council had refused. What did they expect would happen? Perhaps instead of rushing to war, the council should consider whether humanity's response, while extreme, was entirely unjustified. The Torrent Hegemony's ambassador slammed his massive fist on his podium. His species were warriors who respected strength. He argued that the humans had shown dangerous military capability. Their weapons were unlike anything the council had encountered. Antimatter warheads, kinetic weapons that bypassed energy shields, stealth technology that fooled planetary defense systems. If humanity could do this to the Calaxians, what could they do to other council members? The threat needed to be eliminated before it grew stronger. Chairman Quelix finally managed to call for a vote on military intervention. The result was closer than expected. 37 members voted for immediate action against Earth. 41 voted against or abstained. The council was divided, and that division was itself a kind of victory for humanity. They had proven that the old power structure was not as solid as it appeared. While the council argued, Earth made its next move. President Sunho Kang appeared before every major news network in the galaxy, his message translated into hundreds of languages. He spoke calmly but with absolute conviction. He explained what had happened to Ambassador Jihoon Park. He showed footage of the murder, of Vreth firing his weapon in cold blood. He listed the names of the 3 humans who had died and spoke about their families, their dreams, their service to Earth. Then he outlined exactly what humanity had demanded and what the Council had refused. He made it clear that Earth had not wanted war. They had asked for justice through proper channels. Only when those channels failed had they taken action. And he issued a simple statement that would be quoted for years to come. Humanity desired peace with all species, but humanity would not tolerate the murder of its people. Anyone who harmed a human citizen would face the full fury of Earth's response. This was not a threat. It was a promise. The speech was calculated to split the Council further. Many smaller species watched and found themselves sympathizing with the human position. They had suffered under the arrogance of the old powers for centuries. Perhaps these humans could be allies in reforming the galactic order. Secret communications began flowing between Earth's diplomatic corps and various minor council members. New relationships were forming, but the Calaxian Dominion was not ready to accept defeat. High Commander Vraxkel, his pride wounded and his fleet shattered, called upon every ally in favor the Calaxians had accumulated over millennia. The Vrelian Assembly pledged their fleet. The Torrent Hegemony committed forces. A dozen smaller species, fearing what would happen if they refused, sent ships. Within 2 weeks, a massive armada was assembling at a staging point near the border of Council space. Intelligence Officer Jiwan Bayek, now back on Earth after a harrowing escape from the trading station, presented her analysis to the military command. The Calaxians were gathering 170 warships, the largest fleet assembled in 300 years. Their objective was clear: destroy Earth's fleet and then bombard the human homeworld until humanity surrendered unconditionally. Some of the more extreme Calaxian voices were calling for complete extermination. Admiral Una Lee studied the intelligence reports with grim determination. Her fleet had taken losses at Calax Prime. She now had 39 combat-ready ships after reinforcements arrived from the Sol system and the colonies. On paper, she was outnumbered more than 4-1. In a conventional engagement, her fleet would be annihilated. But Admiral Una had no intention of fighting a conventional engagement. She met with President Sunho and the Joint Chiefs to discuss strategy. The Calaxian fleet would likely try to strike directly at Earth, hoping to win the war with a single decisive blow. But getting to Earth required passing through several strategic choke points. The Helix Nebula was the most direct route, a vast cloud of ionized gas that disrupted sensors and communications. Most fleets avoided it because coordinated operations were difficult there. But that same difficulty could be turned into an advantage. Defense Secretary Taejin Nam proposed a different approach. Let the Calaxians come to Earth, defend the home system with fixed fortifications and the remaining fleet. The casualties would be terrible, but Earth might survive. President Sunho considered this option carefully, then rejected it. If they fought at Earth and lost, humanity would be finished. Better to take the fight to the enemy, and at least ensure Earth's survival even if the fleet was destroyed. Admiral Una agreed with the president. She proposed meeting the Calaxian Armada in the Helix Nebula itself. The nebula would negate the enemy's numerical advantage by preventing them from coordinating effectively. Human ships equipped with better electronics and trained for independent action would have the edge. It was a massive gamble. If the plan failed, Earth's fleet would be destroyed far from home. But if it succeeded, they could break the Calaxian offensive before it reached human space. The decision was made. Earth's fleet would deploy to the Helix Nebula and prepare for the largest space battle in recent galactic history. The ships began moving immediately, using fast courier vessels to transport additional supplies and ammunition. Every shipyard in human space was working around the clock to repair battle damage and install upgrades. New weapons were loaded, including more antimatter torpedoes, though supplies were limited. Each warhead took weeks to produce, and the safety protocols were extensive. Captain Sumi Kwan supervised repairs to the Indomitable Spirit. Her ship had taken damage at Calax Prime, including a hole in the starboard armor that had killed 15 crew members. The repair crews were welding new plates into place while Sumi walked the corridors, speaking with her surviving crew. They were tired, scared, and grieving for their lost shipmates, but they were also angry and determined. The Calaxians wanted to destroy Earth. They would have to go through Sumi and her people first. Meanwhile, on Earth itself, the trial of Vreth began. The Calaxian counselor was held in a secure facility, designed specifically to contain alien prisoners. The trial was broadcast live to the entire galaxy. Prosecutors presented evidence of the murder, video footage from multiple angles, testimony from surviving witnesses, communications intercepts proving that Vreth had planned the attack with the approval of several council members. Vreth's defense argued that he had diplomatic immunity and that Earth had no jurisdiction. The judges, a panel of 3 chosen for their expertise in international law, disagreed. They ruled that diplomatic immunity did not extend to murder committed in plain view of hundreds of witnesses. The trial continued for 2 weeks, every moment watched by billions across the galaxy. The evidence against Vreth was overwhelming. He had murdered 3 unarmed humans during a diplomatic negotiation. The conspiracy evidence was equally damning. 5 council members, including Vreth, had met privately 3 days before the incident and discussed the need to put humanity in its place. Communications between them made it clear that they had planned some kind of action. Though the specific details of murder had apparently been Vreth's personal decision, the verdict surprised no one. Guilty of 3 counts of first-degree murder and conspiracy, the sentence was life imprisonment without possibility of parole. Vreth would spend the rest of his long life in a human prison, a living reminder that no one was above justice. The 5 council members who had conspired with him were expelled from the council, and several faced arrest warrants in their home systems. The council killed a human envoy. Earth Strikes Back with Full Fury Part 5. The Helix Nebula was beautiful and deadly. Clouds of ionized gas glowed in shades of purple and blue, illuminated by the light of young stars born in its depths. The gases played havoc with sensors, making it nearly impossible to get a clear picture of what was happening more than a few thousand kilometers away. For the Galaxian Armada, used to fighting in clear space with perfect sensor coverage, it was like being blind. High Commander Vraxcal stared at his tactical display in frustration. His 170 ships were spread across a vast area, struggling to maintain formation. Communications were breaking up. Half his fleet was reporting ghost contacts that disappeared when investigated. He knew the humans were somewhere in this mess, but where? He ordered his ships to increase their search pattern, pushing deeper into the nebula. The first attack came without warning. A Galaxian destroyer on the flank suddenly reported weapons fire. Before it could even identify the attacker, 3 railgun slugs punched through its hull. The ship lost power and began drifting. By the time nearby vessels arrived to help, the human attackers were gone, vanished back into the swirling clouds. Admiral Yuna watched from her command center as her plan unfolded. She had divided her 39 ships into 7 independent hunter groups. Each group had orders to strike isolated enemy vessels and then retreat before reinforcements could arrive. The nebula made it perfect for hit-and-run tactics. The Galaxians could not use their numbers effectively if they could not find their targets. Captain Sumi Kwan led one of these hunter groups. Her indomitable spirit and 3 escort destroyers stalked through the nebula like wolves hunting prey. When her sensors detected a Galaxian cruiser separated from the main fleet, she did not hesitate. Her ships accelerated to attack speed, railguns already charging. They appeared out of the clouds directly behind the enemy vessel, catching it completely by surprise. The first salvo crippled the cruiser's engines. The second destroyed its weapon systems. The third tore open its hull in 3 places. The Galaxian ship tried to turn and fight, but it was too slow and too damaged. Sumi's destroyers finished it with missile strikes. Then her group vanished back into the nebula before enemy reinforcements could respond. 1 more enemy ship destroyed. Dozens more to go. Vraxcal realized too late that he had walked into a trap. The humans were not massing for a fleet battle. They were using the nebula to negate his numerical advantage, picking off his ships 1 or 2 at a time. He tried to pull his fleet back together, ordering all vessels to form defensive clusters, but the nebula made coordination nearly impossible. His orders were delayed or lost in the interference. Ships that tried to group up found themselves ambushed during the maneuver. The battle raged for 8 hours. It was not the grand fleet engagement that historical records usually described. It was a grinding, chaotic mess of small engagements scattered across thousands of cubic kilometers. The Galaxians lost ships steadily, sometimes without even seeing their attackers. The humans took losses too. 2 destroyers were caught by a Galaxian battle group and destroyed before they could escape. The cruiser Defiant, already damaged from the Battle of Calax Prime, took a plasma barrage that breached its reactor. The ship exploded, killing everyone aboard. But the exchange rate was terrible for the Galaxians. For every human ship lost, they were losing 4 or 5 of their own. Their communications were in chaos. Ships were reporting contradictory sensor readings. Some captains were firing at ghost contacts, wasting ammunition on nebula phenomena. Morale was collapsing as the invisible enemy picked them apart piece by piece. Commander Hyun Choi, commanding a stealth frigate group, executed the most daring strike of the battle. His ships penetrated deep into what should have been the safest part of the Galaxian formation. They located Vraxcal's flagship, a massive dreadnought that served as the fleet's command center. Getting close to it required threading through a dozen escort vessels without being detected. It was nearly impossible. Hyun did it anyway. His frigates launched a coordinated strike. Antimatter torpedoes, the last ones in Earth's inventory, accelerated toward the flagship. The Galaxian escorts tried to intercept, but the torpedoes were too fast and too small. 3 of them struck the dreadnought's forward section. The explosions were catastrophic. The entire front quarter of the massive ship simply ceased to exist, vaporized by matter-antimatter annihilation. High Commander Vraxcal survived because he was in the aft command center at the time of the strike, but his primary bridge crew was dead. His main computers were destroyed and his ship was crippled. The flagship began to list, its artificial gravity failing in sections. Vraxcal tried to maintain control, but it was hopeless. His fleet was scattered, his communications were gone, and he had no idea where most of his ships even were. The Galaxian fleet began to break. Individual captains, unable to get orders and watching their comrades die around them, made the decision to retreat. Ships began jumping to hyperspace in 1s and 2s, fleeing the nebula and the nightmare it contained. Vrexcal screamed orders to stand and fight, but no one could hear him. His communications were dead. Within 2 hours, what remained of the Calaxian armada was in full retreat. Admiral Una did not pursue. Her ships were low on ammunition and several were damaged. She had achieved the objective. The Calaxian offensive was broken. She ordered her fleet to secure the area and begin search and rescue operations for any survivors from the destroyed human vessels. The battle was over. The final count was brutal. The Calaxians had lost 83 ships completely destroyed, and another 24 damaged so badly they would never fight again. Only 63 vessels escaped the nebula intact. Earth had lost 14 ships, 2 destroyers, 3 frigates, 4 corvettes, 3 support vessels, and 2 cruisers. Nearly 2,000 human personnel were dead or missing, but they had won. Against odds of more than 4 to 1, they had won. News of the victory reached Earth within hours. The entire planet erupted in celebration. People poured into the streets cheering and crying. They had faced the might of an ancient galactic power and not only survived but prevailed. The impossible had become reality. Humanity was not prey. Humanity was a force to be reckoned with, but President Sunho did not celebrate. He sat in his office looking at the casualty lists, reading the names of people who would never come home. Victory had a price and he felt the weight of every life lost. When his advisors came to congratulate him, he simply nodded and asked them to leave. He needed time to mourn. The Galactic Council reconvened in emergency session. The political landscape had shifted dramatically. The Calaxian Dominion, once a major power, was effectively broken. Their military was shattered, their economy was in chaos, and their government was facing internal revolts. The species that had been their allies were now distancing themselves, afraid of being associated with such a catastrophic failure. Chairman Quelix resigned, unable to continue after the Council's handling of the crisis had led to such disaster. The 5 counselors who had conspired with Vreth were in prison, facing trials in their home systems. The power vacuum created opportunities for the younger species who had long been suppressed. The Eldari and the Zenthi Republic proposed immediate negotiations with Earth, offering full council membership with voting rights. But Earth did not immediately accept. Instead, President Sunho proposed something different. He announced the formation of the Mutual Defense Coalition, an alliance of species committed to mutual protection and equality. Any member that was attacked would receive support from all others. Any member that committed aggression would be expelled. The coalition would serve as a counterbalance to the traditional council power structure. 17 species immediately applied to join. These were the smaller civilizations that had suffered under the dominance of the old powers. They saw humanity as a champion who could protect them and give them a voice. Within months, the coalition had 30 members. The Galactic Council suddenly found itself facing an organized opposition with significant military capability. The trial of Vreth concluded with his sentencing. The Calaxian would spend the rest of his life in a maximum security prison on a remote moon in human space. He would never see his homeworld again. His government had already stripped him of all titles and honors, desperate to distance themselves from the individual whose actions had led to their downfall. Vreth sat in his cell, a living reminder of what happened when arrogance met determination. 6 months after the Battle of Helix Nebula, Ambassador Somin Yu walked through the doors of the Galactic Council chamber. She was the new human representative, chosen specifically for her diplomatic skills and her personal strength. As she approached the central platform, she paused at a new feature that had been installed. A memorial plaque embedded in the floor, marking the exact spot where Ambassador Ji-hoon Park had fallen. The plaque was simple, bearing 3 names: Ji-hoon Park, Dae-ho Kim, and Mira Choi. And below their names, a single sentence: they came in peace seeking dialogue. May their sacrifice ensure that diplomacy is never again answered with violence. The Council killed a human envoy, Earth Strikes. Back with full fury part, the sun had not yet risen over Seoul when the most powerful people on Earth gathered in the underground command center beneath the presidential palace. President Sunho Kang sat at the head of a long table surrounded by holographic displays, showing star maps, fleet positions, and intelligence reports. Around him sat the people who would help decide humanity's next move. Fleet Admiral Una Lee was the first to speak. She was a small woman with iron-gray hair and eyes that had seen 3 colonial wars. She had built Earth's defense fleet from almost nothing into a force that could protect human space. Now she stood before a massive display showing the Calaxian Dominion's territory. The Calaxians controlled 17 star systems. Their military fleet numbered over 300 ships. They had been a spacefaring civilization for 6,000 years. On paper, they could crush humanity's modest fleet of 72 warships without breaking a sweat. But Yuna was not concerned with what was on paper. She activated a series of files marked with the highest security clearance. Project Righteous Fury had been running in secret for 12 years. Ever since humanity's first contact with hostile aliens, the project had one simple goal: develop weapons that could kill things much more powerful than humans. Because throughout history, humanity had always faced bigger, stronger opponents, and throughout history, humanity had found ways to win anyway. Defense Secretary Taijin Nam leaned forward, studying the weapons data with wide eyes. He had known about Righteous Fury in general terms, but seeing the specifics was shocking. Antimatter warheads, relativistic kinetic weapons, nanoweapon swarms, electronic warfare systems designed to hack alien computer networks, genetic targeting systems. Some of these weapons violated treaties Earth had signed with the Council, but the Council had just murdered Earth's ambassador. Colonel Junho Han of Strategic Command outlined the plan. Humanity could not win a long war against the combined forces of the Galactic Council. Earth's industrial capacity was still growing. Their colonies were vulnerable and they had no allies. But they did not need to win a long war. They needed to deliver one devastating blow that would make every species in the galaxy think twice before threatening humanity again. The target would be the Calaxian Dominion. They had started this war by killing Jihoon. They would be the example. The plan had 3 objectives: destroy the Calaxian home fleet, eliminate their shipbuilding capacity, and capture Counselor Vreth alive. If humanity could accomplish all 3, the message would be clear. Attack Earth and we will erase you from the stars. President Sunho listened to everything without interrupting. When the presentations were finished, he looked around the table at each person present. These were good people who had worked for years to build peaceful relations with alien species. Now he was asking them to prepare for war. The weight of that decision pressed down on him like a physical force. He spoke quietly but firmly. Earth would send an ultimatum to the Galactic Council. They had 72 hours to surrender Vreth and the officials who had authorized the attack. If the Council refused, humanity would take action. It was a simple choice: justice or war. The message was transmitted within the hour. It reached Council Station Nexus 7 and was forwarded to every member species. The reaction was predictable. Most Council members dismissed it as empty threats from an angry but powerless species. Chairman Quellick sent back a formal response expressing regret over the incident but explaining that Vreth could not be extradited due to complex legal precedents and diplomatic immunity. Some of the smaller species on the Council watched the exchange with interest. The Eldari had been pushing for reform for decades. The Zenthi Republic had complained about Calaxian aggression in border regions. Perhaps these humans were crazy enough to actually challenge the old power structure. It would be interesting to see what happened. While diplomats exchanged messages, Earth's military machine roared to life. Across the solar system, warships powered up their engines and loaded weapons. Captain Sumi Kwan walked through the corridors of her dreadnought, the Indomitable Spirit. The ship was the pride of Earth's fleet, bristling with railguns and missile tubes. Her crew of 800 had trained for years for a moment like this. Now they would find out if their training was enough. Commander Hyun Choi ran final checks on his stealth frigate squadron. These 6 ships were experimental designs using technology humanity had reverse-engineered from captured alien sensors. They could hide from almost any detection system, at least for a while. Their mission would be the most dangerous of all. Get past an entire planetary defense network, land on the surface, and capture one of the most heavily guarded individuals in the galaxy. Engineers worked around the clock loading the new weapons. The antimatter warheads had to be handled with extreme care. A containment failure would vaporize half a city. The kinetic missiles were simpler but required precise calculations. Fire them at the wrong angle and they would sail past their targets into deep space. Every weapon, every system, every backup generator was checked and rechecked. Meanwhile, Intelligence Officer Jiwan Bayek was doing the most dangerous job of all. She had been undercover on a neutral trading station for 3 years, pretending to be a merchant while actually gathering information on alien military capabilities. When she received the activation code for Righteous Fury, she knew her time was running out. The aliens would soon realize Earth was preparing for war. Jiwan hacked into the Galaxian communication network using tools Earth's cyber warfare division had developed specifically for this purpose. Alien encryption was sophisticated, but it was designed to protect against other aliens, not against humans who thought about security in completely different ways. Within 18 hours, she had the information Earth needed. Vreth was hiding on Calax Prime, the Galaxian homeworld. He was in a secure compound protected by the Dominion's best soldiers. The location was in the Northern Hemisphere, surrounded by anti-aircraft batteries and shield generators. Getting to him would require either a massive assault or a small team with perfect intelligence. Jiwan sent everything she had back to Earth, then destroyed her equipment and prepared to evacuate before security forces found her. The 72-hour deadline approached. Earth's fleet assembled at rally points throughout the solar system. News broadcasts showed the preparations to the entire population. There was no point hiding it anymore. Everyone knew war was coming. The streets of every human city were filled with people watching the skies, wondering if they would be safe, wondering if this was really happening. Some people protested. They held signs saying humanity should seek peaceful solutions, that more violence would only lead to more death. But most people supported the military action. The images of Ambassador Jihoon Park lying dead on the council chamber floor had been broadcast everywhere. The contempt in Vreth's eyes as he fired the weapon was burned into public consciousness. This was not about conquest or expansion. This was about justice. President Sunho gave a televised address to the nation and the world. He explained what had happened, what Earth had demanded, and what would happen if the Council refused. He did not hide the risks. War with an advanced alien civilization could lead to terrible losses, but he also explained why this moment mattered. If humanity allowed its ambassador to be murdered without response, they would forever be seen as weak, as acceptable targets. Better to fight now and establish that humans were not prey. The deadline passed. The Council sent another message, this one more condescending than the last. Chairman Quelix personally recorded a statement suggesting that humanity needed to mature before attempting galactic diplomacy. He recommended Earth withdraw its colony applications and spend a few centuries learning how civilized species behaved. Admiral Yuna Lee read the message in her command chair aboard the Soul's Hammer. Her flagship was at the head of a battle group containing 23 of Earth's best warships. They were positioned at the edge of the solar system, drives warmed up and weapons hot. When she finished reading the Council's response, she smiled coldly. She opened a channel to the entire fleet. Her voice was calm and professional, but everyone who heard it felt a chill run down their spine. She told them that the Council had refused Earth's demand for justice. She told them that in 6 hours they would jump to hyperspace and emerge in the Galaxian home system. She told them that their mission was to show the galaxy that humanity would not be pushed around by anyone, no matter how old or powerful they thought they were. Then she gave the order that would start the war. All ships prepare for combat operations. Target Calax Prime. Mission: total destruction of enemy military capabilities. Rules of engagement: weapons free. And one more thing. Take no unnecessary risks with human lives, but show no mercy to those who threaten Earth. The countdown began. Across the fleet, crews made final preparations. Some prayed to various gods. Others wrote letters to families just in case they did not come back. A few simply stared at the displays showing their target system, wondering what they would find there. In the command center back on Earth, President Sunho watched the fleet markers on the strategic display. The Council killed a human envoy. Earth strikes back with full fury part. The massive doors of the Galactic Council chamber slid open with a soft hiss. Jihoon Park walked through them with steady steps, his diplomatic uniform crisp and clean. Behind him, 2 security officers followed closely. Lieutenant Daeho Kim kept his hand near his sidearm, while Ensign Mira Choi scanned the enormous room with careful eyes. They had done this many times before, but something felt different today. The council chamber was a marvel of alien architecture. The ceiling stretched so high it seemed to touch the stars themselves. Hundreds of delegates from across the galaxy sat in circular tiers, looking down at the central speaking platform where Jihoon now stood. Some were humanoid, others were nothing like anything found on Earth. Reptilian scales, insectoid shells, beings made of pure energy contained in force fields. The diversity was breathtaking, but the atmosphere was cold. Jihoon cleared his throat and began his presentation. Earth had been trying to join the Galactic Council for 5 years now. Humanity had proven they could travel between stars. They had established colonies on 3 worlds. Their technology was advancing rapidly. By every measure, they deserved a seat at this table. But the Council kept finding reasons to say no. Today's meeting was about trade routes. Earth wanted access to the Outer Rim territories, a region rich in rare minerals and strategic location points. Several human mining operations were already working there, established before humanity even knew the Council existed. Now the Council wanted those routes restricted, claimed by species who had been traveling the stars for thousands of years. Jihoon argued his case with passion but remained respectful. He showed holographic displays of Earth's mining operations, proving they had arrived first in those sectors. He presented economic data showing how open trade would benefit everyone. He even offered compromise positions, suggesting shared access rather than exclusive rights. For 2 hours he spoke, answered questions, and negotiated. Then Counselor Vreth stood up. The Calaxian was a massive creature, nearly 3 meters tall with dark green scales and eyes like yellow fire. His species had been part of the Council for over 4,000 years. They controlled significant military power and vast territories. Vreth was known for his aggressive stance toward newer species, believing they needed to earn their place through centuries of subservience. The Calaxian's voice boomed across the chamber. He called humanity arrogant. He said they were children playing at being adults. He insisted that Earth had no right to claim anything in space, that everything humans touched belonged to the Council by ancient law. His words dripped with contempt, and many other Council members nodded in agreement. Jihoon remained calm. He had dealt with Vreth's hostility before. He responded politely, pointing out that ancient laws should not override current reality. Humanity existed. They were here. They had rights like any other species. Perhaps it was time for the Council to update its thinking and welcome new voices rather than suppress them. The chamber grew quiet. Jihoon's words had struck a nerve. Several younger species in the Council looked interested, even supportive. The balance of power in the galaxy had remained unchanged for so long. Maybe it was time for change. Vreth's scales seemed to darken with rage. He descended from his seat, his clawed feet making heavy sounds on the polished floor. Council Chairman Quelix called for order, but Vreth ignored him. The Calaxian walked directly toward the human ambassador, his bulk making the platform tremble slightly. Daiho stepped forward, positioning himself between Vreth and Jihoon. The lieutenant's hand moved to his weapon. Mira moved to the other side, her fingers touching her communicator to call for backup. But diplomatic protocol was clear. They could not draw weapons in the Council chamber unless fired upon first. Vreth stopped just meters from Jihoon. The massive alien looked down at the human, his yellow eyes blazing. For a moment it seemed he might just be trying to intimidate the ambassador. Then his hand moved to his robes. Everything happened in seconds. Vreth pulled out a small plasma pistol, the kind diplomats sometimes carried for personal protection. Daiho shouted a warning and lunged forward. The Calaxian fired. The plasma bolt struck Jihoon directly in the chest, burning through his uniform and into his body. The human ambassador made no sound. He simply fell backward, his eyes already empty. Mira screamed and drew her weapon. Vreth turned and fired again. The bolt caught her in the throat. She collapsed beside her ambassador. Daiho managed to pull his gun free, but Vreth was faster. A third shot hit the lieutenant in the head. He dropped instantly. The Council chamber erupted into chaos. Some delegates jumped to their feet, shouting in various languages. Others activated personal shields, fearing more violence. Chairman Quelix was yelling for security, for medics, for someone to stop this madness. But Vreth was already moving toward the exits, his diplomatic immunity protecting him from immediate arrest. Calaxian guards appeared as if they had been waiting. They surrounded Vreth and rushed him out of the chamber. By the time Council security forces arrived, the Calaxian counselor was aboard his ship, already accelerating away from the station. Diplomatic protocols prevented the station from firing on a Council member's vessel. Within minutes, Vreth had jumped to hyperspace and vanished. Medical teams rushed to the 3 fallen humans, but there was nothing to be done. All 3 were dead. Ji-hoon Park's blood stained the ancient floor of the council chamber. A dark red pool spreading slowly across polished stone that had seen thousands of years of debate but rarely any violence. Chairman Quelix tried to restore order. He declared the session ended. He promised a full investigation. He expressed deep regret over what had happened. But his words felt empty. Many council members were already leaving, some looking genuinely shocked, others wearing expressions that might have been satisfaction. The humans had been getting too bold, too confident. Perhaps this would remind them of their place. The news reached Earth within 6 hours. Faster-than-light communication was one of the first technologies humanity had mastered. The message arrived at the presidential palace in Seoul at 3 in the morning local time. President Sun-ho Kang was awakened by his chief of staff. The words seemed impossible at first. Ambassador Park murdered? His entire security detail killed? In the council chamber itself? Sun-ho sat up in bed, suddenly wide awake. He ordered an emergency cabinet meeting within the hour. He contacted Fleet Admiral Yuna Lee and told her to prepare for anything. He called the directors of Intelligence, Defense, and Foreign Affairs. And then he sat alone for 5 minutes, staring at a photograph of Ji-hoon Park that hung on his office wall. Ji-hoon had been more than an ambassador. He had been Sun-ho's friend since university days. They had both believed that humanity could find its place in the galaxy through peaceful means, through dialogue and mutual respect. Ji-hoon had volunteered for the most difficult diplomatic post imaginable, knowing the risks but believing in the mission. Now he was dead, murdered in cold blood by a creature who thought humans were beneath him, and the Galactic Council's first response was to let the killer escape. President Kang felt something cold settle in his chest. The time for peaceful negotiation had ended. Ji-hoon's death would not be in vain. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity protected its own, and those who spilled human blood would pay a price beyond imagination. He picked up his phone and made one more call. The person on the other end answered immediately despite the hour. Sun-ho spoke 3 words that would change galactic history forever. Activate righteous fury. The Council killed a human envoy. Earth strikes back with full fury part. 3. The human fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Galaxian system in perfect formation. 23 warships materialized in a coordinated pattern that spoke of countless hours of training and preparation. At the center of the formation, Fleet Admiral Yuna Lee stood on the bridge of the Soul's Hammer, studying the tactical displays with cold satisfaction. Everything was proceeding according to plan. Alarms began wailing across every Galaxian military installation in the system. The sudden appearance of an unknown fleet sent defense forces scrambling to battle stations. Within minutes, the Galaxian home fleet was powering up weapons and moving to intercept. High Commander Vraxcal could not believe what his sensors were telling him. The humans here? Had they lost their minds? He opened a communication channel to the human fleet, intending to demand their immediate withdrawal. But before he could speak, Admiral Yuna transmitted a message that would be recorded in history books for generations. Her voice was steady and clear with no trace of anger or emotion. She stated simply that the Galaxian Dominion had murdered Earth's ambassador and his security personnel. The Galaxians had refused to deliver the guilty parties for justice. Therefore, Earth had come to collect what was owed. Any Galaxian ship that did not immediately power down weapons and surrender would be destroyed. Vraxcal laughed. He actually laughed. His fleet numbered 47 vessels, including 6 heavy cruisers that massed more than any 3 human ships combined. The Galaxians had been fighting space battles for thousands of years. These primitive humans thought they could challenge the might of the Dominion with their tiny fleet. He would teach them the price of arrogance. The Galaxian fleet advanced in a standard combat formation, preparing to envelop the human force and destroy it with concentrated fire. Vraxcal had used this tactic successfully in dozens of battles. The humans would break and run or they would die. Either outcome was acceptable, but the humans did not run. Instead, they did something Vraxcal had never seen before. The fleet split into 3 groups, each moving at different speeds and vectors. Small drone swarms launched from the human ships, thousands of tiny automated weapons spreading out in a cloud that confused Galaxian targeting systems, and then the humans opened fire. The first indication that something was terribly wrong came when a Calaxian destroyer simply ceased to exist. One moment it was there, shields up and weapons charging. The next moment it was an expanding cloud of debris. The human railguns fired solid tungsten slugs at incredible speeds. The kinetic energy was so enormous that the slugs punched straight through energy shields as if they were not even there. Metal armor, designed to deflect plasma and laser fire, shattered like glass under the impact. Captain Sumi Kwan stood on the bridge of the Indomitable Spirit, calling out targets with practiced efficiency. Her crew responded with mechanical precision, loading and firing railgun rounds as fast as the weapons could cycle. Each shot was carefully calculated to hit vital areas: engines, command centers, weapon systems. The humans had studied Calaxian ship designs for years. They knew exactly where to hit. The battle rapidly descended into chaos. Calaxian formations broke apart as ships tried to avoid the devastating kinetic weapons. Energy shields, the backbone of their defensive doctrine, were proving almost useless. The humans had done their homework. They had designed weapons specifically to counter the Calaxians' technological advantages. Then the humans unveiled another surprise. Captain Sumi gave the order, and her ship launched a new type of missile. The Calaxians tracked the incoming weapons and prepared to shoot them down with point defense systems. But these missiles did something unexpected. At a predetermined distance, each one fragmented into thousands of smaller projectiles, creating a storm of metal that overwhelmed the Calaxian defense systems. 3 light cruisers were shredded in seconds, their hulls perforated by countless impacts. Vraxkal realized too late that he had made a terrible mistake. These humans fought like nothing he had encountered before. They were aggressive, coordinated, and utterly ruthless. Every tactic the Calaxians tried was countered almost before it began. It was as if the humans knew exactly what the Calaxian fleet would do, and had planned responses in advance. While the main battle raged, Commander Hyun Choi was leading his 6 stealth frigates on the most dangerous mission of all. Using experimental cloaking technology, his small squadron had slipped past the orbital defense platforms surrounding Calax Prime. The technology was not perfect. If a sensor sweep passed directly over them at close range, they would be detected. But the Calaxians were focused on the main fleet battle. They were not looking for small ships sneaking toward their home world. Jan's hands were steady on the controls as he guided his ship through the upper atmosphere. Behind him, his strike team was checking equipment one final time. 20 soldiers in powered armor, carrying weapons designed for close combat against creatures much larger and stronger than humans. Their target was a fortified compound in the northern mountains where Counselor Vreth was hiding. Back in orbit, the fleet battle was entering its decisive phase. The Calaxians had lost 17 ships already, and more were heavily damaged. But they still outnumbered the humans, and some of their heavy cruisers were finally getting into effective firing range. Massive plasma cannons began to hammer the human formation. The destroyer Relentless took a direct hit and exploded, killing all 200 crew members instantly. The cruiser Defiant lost its forward section to another blast, venting atmosphere and bodies into space. Admiral Yuna watched her losses mount and knew she had to end this quickly. She had kept one weapon in reserve, waiting for the right moment. Now was that moment. She gave the order, and her weapons officer's face went pale. The officer hesitated, knowing what this weapon could do. Yuna repeated the order, her voice harder this time. The officer complied. 5 antimatter torpedoes launched from the Soul's hammer. Each warhead contained less than a gram of antimatter suspended in a magnetic containment field. When those fields collapsed upon impact, matter and antimatter would annihilate each other in an explosion that made nuclear weapons look like firecrackers. The Calaxian sensors detected the incoming weapons but could not identify what they were. Standard countermeasures were deployed. The torpedoes ignored them. Their guidance systems locked onto the largest Calaxian ships. 3 heavy cruisers and 2 battlecruisers became targets. The antimatter warheads struck within seconds of each other. The explosions were blinding, pure energy. The conversion of matter directly into light and force. The 5 Calaxian ships simply vanished, vaporized in microseconds. The shockwaves from the explosions damaged a dozen nearby vessels, knocking out shields and sensors. And the psychological impact was even greater. The Calaxians suddenly realized they were fighting an enemy with weapons they could not even comprehend. Vraxkal stared at his displays in horror. More than half his fleet was gone or crippled. The humans were still fighting with barely diminished strength. He had no choice. He gave the order to retreat. The surviving Calaxian ships broke off and began jumping to hyperspace, fleeing their own home system. The humans let them go, focusing instead on the orbital defense platforms and shipyards. Marine Colonel Bora Shin led the assault on the primary shipyard facility. Her transport had docked with the station after blast doors were blown open by shaped charges. Now 200 Marines were storming through the corridors, fighting Calaxian security forces in brutal close combat. The Calaxians were bigger and stronger, but the humans were faster and worked as perfectly coordinated teams, and their weapons were devastating at short range. Bora's shotgun roared, firing explosive shells that sent a Calaxian soldier flying backward with massive wounds. Around her, her Marines advanced in fire teams using cover and suppressing fire exactly as they had trained. The Calaxians fought bravely, but they were defending a civilian facility. They were not prepared for an assault by professional soldiers equipped with military-grade hardware. Within 4 hours, the shipyards were secured. Calaxian workers were evacuated, and the Marines began placing demolition charges on critical structures. 2 hours after that, the shipyards exploded in a series of carefully controlled detonations. Calaxia's ability to build new warships was crippled. It would take them years to rebuild if they ever did. Meanwhile, on the planet's surface, Commander Hyan's strike team had reached Vreth's compound. The building was surrounded by high walls and guard towers. Automated weapons tracked movement and energy barriers blocked the entrances. It looked impregnable, but the humans had not come this far to be stopped by walls. Hyan signaled his demolition expert. The soldier fired a missile that hit the wall with a thunderous explosion. Before the dust settled, the strike team was moving. They poured through the breach in 2 columns, their armor's sensors highlighting enemies through the smoke. Calaxian guards opened fire with plasma weapons, but the human armor was designed to disperse energy attacks. The soldiers pressed forward, returning fire with rifles that fired armor-piercing rounds.